Sales is the most lucrative skill in the world, period. The problem is most sales advice out there today is outdated, cheesy, and could even keep you from the deals that can make all the difference in your career. This is the No BS Sales School, a podcast for entrepreneurs and salespeople who want to master the skill of selling without all the BS. I feel like I'm so lucky because I've got two boys. One of them is almost 21 and one of them is almost 18. And they've been going out in the woods and in the water with me for, almost their whole lives. And they're avid hunters and fishermen and outdoorsmen. And it is one of my favorite things to have watched them grow into this and to pick up the skills and to love what they're doing, to love the outdoors. My oldest son, Walker, the third, says that his favorite place in the whole world is 5 miles behind a locked gate by himself, which is great. And he's studying forestry and doing all kinds of cool things that may at some point put him 5 miles behind a locked gate. And I hope that's his own gate someday. But it didn't start that way, right? They didn't start with any skills. They started with, just like everybody does, with no skills and just a lot of hope. And I think one of the saddest faces I've ever seen, I took my two boys fishing down in Charleston one time, and we were fishing off the jetties, which means we were just fishing kind of on the bottom. And my younger son, Mitchell, as he normally does, he caught 5 fish, and my older son could not catch a fish to save his life. And it was just so sad, so sad. And all of a sudden, he got a bite, and he picked up this really nice sea trout. It's a nice fish. It was a keeper. It was a great fish. And he was so happy. He was beaming with pride. It's one of those things that just makes a dad's heart just melt. It was just awesome. And so we finished fishing. I think Mitchell caught 5 fish and Walker caught 1. I think that was the total. And Walker was still making a big deal because Mitchell had only caught redfish and he caught a trout, which is, he'd said, much more difficult. Well, as we're pulling back into the harbor, the guide says, let's put the fish in a bag, take them out of the live well, put them in a bag so that we can clean them. And so the guide took Mitchell's fish and put them in the bag. And then he went to get Walker's fish. Walker said, no, I got it. And he grabbed the fish, and the fish flopped and went over the side of the boat, back in the water. And I've never seen a sadder face in my life than my son watching his prize fish that he was so excited, he worked so hard, that now was gone without a trace. It was so sad. He cried and cried and cried. Why the hell do I tell you this story? Other than that was a sad day. And we laugh like hell about it right now. Why do I tell you this story? People do this in sales all the time. Think about this. Have you ever had a deal you were working on? A sale, big sale, little sale? Let's just pretend it was a big sale. And you get it over the finish line and it closes. And you are so excited because the deal finally closed. And you go high five your boss. You put your name on the board and you head off home for the weekend knowing that you just made a great sale and things are looking up for you. Good job. And you come in Monday morning for the sales meeting ready to kind of talk about your sale anyway, but you happen to check your email. And what you found was the person that you sold to sent you an email that says, John, I'm so sorry. We're not going to move forward. Tear up that check, tear up the contract. We've decided to go a different direction. Has that ever happened to you? If it hadn't, it just means you hadn't been in sales very long. It's going to happen. It's going to happen at some point, unless you're prepared for it. And again, nothing can stop somebody from doing that to you, but if the deal's going to blow up, when do you want to know? I want to know right now. So I've futzed around with this for a long time, and I've figured out there are usually 3 reasons why a deal blows up. One of 3 reasons why a deal blows up after you've closed it, after it's done, right? Number 1, it's kind of obvious. It's buyer's remorse, where the person who bought goes home, goes back to the office, and all of a sudden they wake up and they go, holy shit, I just spent a ton of money on that. I don't think that could be a top priority right now. And then they freak out and cancel. Or they take their idea back to the team. Hey, we just bought this software program, or we just did this. And the team goes, oh God, we hate that. That's stupid. You never should have done it. Right? They get a lot of blowback from the team. We're not going to use that, boss. So then they freak out and come back and say, shit, we got to stop. We got to unwind this. I'm not going to pay you. And of course, you could sue somebody, but freaking nobody wins with the lawyers in that, right? So there's a second way things blow up. Tell me if you've heard this before. You take business from somebody else. You pick off your competitor. That bastard, you take business from it. It's freaking awesome. And you close business. And then you get a call the next day or 2 days later that says, we need to cancel that because I've decided to stay where we are. No reason to change. Has that ever happened before? Where your competitor calls back crying, whining, sniveling, begging to keep the business, and your buyer just goes up in smoke, right? They made some kind of promise to cut fees or do whatever or fix all those problems, and you're left with shit. The third way we can blow something up is implementation, right? Where maybe it's in software, it could be anything, right? Where when you get started, it's kind of rocky, right? There's implementation involved. You got to get their people involved. Maybe things don't work exactly the right way the first time that ever happened, right? Or it's complicated. A lot of steps they got to go through. And then the call you get is, this doesn't work like it's supposed to, blah, 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 blah. And you've ruined the beginning of the relationship, and maybe you end it right there. So if this has ever happened to you, or you're afraid it might, here's what I'd suggest. Tell your now customer, client, that this is gonna happen. Tell them it's gonna happen, and then ask them what they're gonna do about it. For example, the first one, maybe you say, and now remember, this is called locking the sale, making sure that it's locked, making sure it doesn't pop out of the box again, right? So what you do is, if you have lost a deal because there's been blowback from the employees or because somebody changed their mind just because they were nervous, after they've bought it, after they've signed, after the money's changed hands, I want you to say, are you sure you want to do this? If they go, yeah, and you say, what are you going to say to yourself when you wake up in the middle of the night and you realize, holy shit, I just spent $60,000 on whatever, or $6,000 or $600. What are you going to say to yourself to make you feel better? Or, hey, when you take this back to your team, I always assume the negative. I say, when you take this back to your team, they're going to say, we hate this. How are you going to respond when they say that? How are you going to respond when they tell you they hate it? Right? And sometimes they go, oh, they're not going to hate it. And you say, well, what if they do? How will you respond? And let them figure that shit out. Maybe you can offer advice. Maybe you can say, here's what we tell people in your situation. Here's what some other customers like you have told their employees. This is something we're going to do. Y'all just need to get used to it. You need to buy into this. This is our path. We're going to take it. So get used to it. It's one of those I'm the boss moments to do what the hell I said. Right? That's how you can let them know how to respond. I would let them know that the worst may happen. So, second one, competitor calls and whines, right? Close the deal, get the check, get the contract signed, get the PO, whatever. And then I want you to say, do you think John, the former guy who was doing this for you before, do you think he's going to call? And you know what? Sometimes they'll go, yeah, probably. You say, what do you think he'll say? And they'll say, oh, he'll probably be pretty mad. Well, what do you think he'll offer to do? I mean, you think he'll beg to get the business back? And they'll go, uh-huh. And you say, well, when he asks you to get the business back, when he begs you and cries not to leave him, how are you going to handle it? Prepare them for that conversation. Prepare them for it. Let them know this is gonna happen. Here's the thing. If they say, you might even bring up, what if he says he'll cut his price? What happens then? You might as well take them there. Because if you're going to have a problem, when do you want to know about it? Ideally, what you hope they'll say is, I'll tell him to stick it up his ass. He should have brought that to me earlier. But if they say, well, I'll have to consider it, you might say, well, sounds to me like you should. Do we even need to move forward? Because I guarantee he's going to offer you less money. He's going to do it for less. That means you missed something, by the way. That's a good sign that you missed something. You missed the pain step. You missed a budget step. You missed something. That's your fault. But at least you know. You can't blame anybody else but yourself. Now, the last one where complicated procedures and implementing stuff, right? I want you to tell them, hey, look, after the contract's signed, after the money's changed hands, here's what I need you to know. This is not going to go perfectly. It's not. It's going to be a mess. It always is. We have a 1,000-point checklist. We work very carefully to find these things before they happen. And usually we do. But we've never had a perfect implementation. There's always one thing that comes up. Now, most of the time, we'll catch it before you do. But if you notice something that isn't right, isn't like you expected, I want you to let me know. Pick up the phone, call me, tell me what's going on, and we'll get to the bottom of it immediately. And I would love it if you're the first one that things go perfectly, but I promise you, you're probably not going to be that. What happens if you're this honest with people? What happens if you just tell them that it's all going to go to shit, but it's going to be okay? It's just the truth. Here's the thing. They've trusted you enough to give you money to make their problem go away. Don't forget about them now. Let them know what's going to happen next. Your job is always to manage your prospects' expectations and to manage your customers' and clients' expectations throughout the relationship. I think it's a great saw. It's a great belief that 99.9999% of the reasons that relationships end badly are because somebody didn't manage somebody else's expectations. And it's your fault if you don't manage your customers' expectations. I'm Walker McKay with No BS Sales. Share this episode with somebody who needs to hear it. And don't participate in National Screw Off Month. Go out there and prospect so you have a damn good December and January. Thanks for listening. Thanks for listening to the No BS Sales School podcast. If you're struggling to close deals, then I want to invite you to take my free mini course, where you'll learn the 7 most expensive sales mistakes that will cost you time, money, and credibility. So be sure to click the link in the show notes or go to www.7salesmistakes.com. That's the number 7salesmistakes.com. Thanks again for listening to the No BS Sales School podcast.